Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sathology means a science of truth or study of truth. The opposite of that is mythology, which means a study of fake lie imagination or science of fake lie imagination. The faith based colonialists called all native history as mythology. The reason was they wanted to propagate their Christian faith to the colonized people. Same was the case with other proselytizing religions like Islam and other people, where they completely destroyed the history of the locals. But wherever the locals rose, that's where the ideological attack started, and which we see in the case of India, Japan. Now, Japan has totally banned those missionaries. That's a different thing. China has banned. India remains democratic, and that means the West still has some powers to interfere. So today we have a very special guest, and we'll speak about the colonization, the mindset of Indians in a academic way. And even today we call them coconuts, brown from outside, English from inside. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Prashant Pol.
Namaskar.
So Prashant Polji, like, how serious was the attack on the Indian education system? British attacks on the education system.
I think it was deep rooted. It was really serious in that sense.
Mhm.
And when Britishers came to India, prior to that, as we have seen, we discussed also that Indian education system was one of the best in the world. We are aware about it.
That's right.
And eh, each and every part of the world, students used to come to India. Takshashila, Nalanda, where the universities, we all are aware about it. I'm not repeating that. But point here is that in 1197, in the year 1197, when Bakhtiyar Khilji had destroyed Nalanda, and not only Nalanda, many such universities were destroyed by Muslim invaders. Naturally, the kind of well-knit Indian education system, particularly the higher education, was no more. And Britishers came to India in the year 1608. East India Company was formed in England in the year 1600, and after 8 years, 1608, they came to India. They reached to the we call it west coast of India, the city called Surat. They have landed there. But in between 1197 to this 1608, or then when they really started doing something to India, that is in the when they won the Battle of Plassey in 1757. So from 1197 to 1757, around 550 years, whether India didn't have any education system? No, India had some education system, though higher education was destroyed by Muslim invaders, but wherein like Vijayanagar Empire and all those things were there. Therein, even some kind of higher education was there. But by and large, as a country, India had a primary education and which was very strong primary education system, very strong. And in this primary education system, we had proper schools. And most importantly, you know, these schools were not aided by the then government, the then kingdom, kings, etc. No, they had self made kind of schools. The kings that time had given some land to these schools, and those and whatever the income was coming from that land, that income goes to the school, and schools were self reliant in that respect. Therefore, even if there were a lot of uh, turmoil there, a lot of fighting was going on, a lot of problems were there as a country as a whole, but still the school education system was there. But what happened when Britishers came to India in 1608, and then somehow after a lot of fighting, doing some politics and doing a lot of things, it was the year 1757 when they could get hold or sort of ruling in the eastern part of India. That's called Bengal. The then Bengal was very large. It was it was inclusive of the today's Bangladesh and the West Bengal part of India and plus Bihar and all. That was the entire Bengal. So they started ruling the Bengal. When they started ruling the Bengal in 1757, they were they found out that in a Bengal province itself, only in Bengal province, 34% of the land out of total taxable land, 34% of the land was not giving any tax. They tried to find out why. Then they understood, they came to know that this 34% of total land was allocated to each and every school. And whatever income was coming from that land, that used to go to the schools, and all the teachers in the school, all the administration of the school was very well, is properly administered, teachers were paid properly and all. So whatever was happening in the country, whether Muslims were ruling, where Marathas were ruling, whether this Britishers started ruling, irrespective of that, this primary education and middle school education system in the entire country was going on very well. But what happened when this Britishers have started finding out, because after 1757, after winning the Battle of Plassey, they were aiming to rule the entire country. They wanted to make India as their colony. India, the then India, was huge and large India. So their last battle was with Marathas. That was in the year 1818, 1818. And Marathas were lost this battle against the Britishers. So whatever Marathas used to rule the entire country, that entire portion was under rule of this Britishers, East India Company, they used to call it, except the Punjab and Northwest province, the then Northwest province, except that entire India was almost under the rule of Britishers. And then they started to find out that what is the system, administrative system, the education system, and sort of that. How was the system? So they did some surveys. Fortunately, these survey reports are available. They are documented. They are available today. The survey was on the presidency based, region based, we can call it. So one survey was in the Madras presidency, and that was after this. They won the Maratha battle with Marathas in 1818. Then they started actually trying to create their own network and how to create the administration and all. So therein in Madras presidency, today we call it Chennai, Tamil Nadu and all, but that time the almost entire South India was under the Madras presidency. That time the governor was Sir Thomas Munro, and Thomas Munro was Governor General. He was Governor General from 1820 to 1827. In the 15th June 1822, he issued a kind of letter or order to all his entire Madras presidency officers to conduct a survey on what kind of education system is available, so that Britishers can have their own system. And based on the feedback what he got, based on the reports what he got from his officers, he created, or he made some minutes, and those are published, those are available even the public domain. Sir Thomas Munro's Minutes on Education 1822 to 1826. That's the name of these reports. Those are available. Interesting in the point in these reports is that the report says that every village, I'm not saying city, every village has a school, Every village has a school. All these schools are self-reliant, and education calendar is going on properly without any disturbance, without any problem. Similarly, at the same time, Bombay Presidency, whose Governor General was Mount Stuart Elphiston, he also gave an order to conduct the survey. He was Governor General for this Bombay Presidency from 1819 to 1827. Bombay Presidency was almost entire western part, including today's part of the Pakistan, was also there in the Bombay's presidency. And he put a very learned and person who is a scholar called G.L. Prendergast. So G.L. Prendergast has did some his all his exercise, did a report based on the survey feedback and all. And G.L. Prendergast writes that this is amazing that, I just quote what G.L. Prendergast writes. He says that there's hardly a village, great or small, bigger or small, throughout our territories in which there is not at least one school, and in large villages more. Same thing what Madras Presidency says, that every village in India, in spite of various invaders, various problems, various looting, lot of problems, still in 1820s, even in Bombay Presidency also, every village has a school. And if the villages are bigger enough, cities are large enough, then there are more schools. That's what Prendergast report says. Similarly, at the same time, all these are contemporary reports. In Bengal, as I said, that British started ruling in Bengal, so naturally they made Bengal, Kolkata, that time Calcutta, as their capital. And this Calcutta capital was there till 1911. In 1911, Britishers shifted from Calcutta to Delhi as their capital. That time, Lord William Bentinck was the great Governor General. He gave responsibility to do the survey or to conduct the survey in Bengal province to William Adams. Naturally, the letters were sent to all the respective officers in the various district and whatever their system was there. And they got the feedback, they got the survey reports and all. Based on that, this William Adams have published reports that's called Adams reports. That was little later than Bombay and Madras presidency's reports. These reports, Adams reports, they are known, famous. They are from 1835 to 1838. Therein he writes that Bengal and Bihar has more, those two provinces have more than 100,000 schools. So, as regards to the population of both these provinces are concerned, both these states are concerned, both these regions are concerned, almost every 400 people have one school. Now, these schools are not very great building and all. Many schools were conducted in a temple. Temple used to host the schools. Some small, they call it dharamshala, some small temple, some small building, public utility, like that. In those kind of areas, these schools used to be conducted. But they were conducted in proper manner, and many schools have their own land, many schools have their own way of earning and all. So they were all self-reliant in that sense. Punjab province was also very large. But when this service, they were conducting, that time this Punjab province was not under Britishers. Maharana Ranjit Singh was very powerful. Lahore was his capital, and he was fighting with the Britishers. So that fighting was going on. And therefore, in Punjab, the survey was conducted after 50 years. And after 50 years, when the surveys were conducted, a great person called G.W. Leitner, he was given the responsibility to conduct the survey and to collect the information and create a report. So he wrote a report, as I said, that almost 50 years later. And his collection, that report collection, or his own report, is History of Indigenous Education in Punjab. That's basically name of his report in that way. He also writes the same thing. So you go to any part of the country, even after 50 years of what these reports were published for the other presidencies, Punjab presidency report says that every village in Punjab has a school. A great distributed system was there for education. Education was not centralized, it was distributed. Same thing, land was allotted to the various schools so that they could have the proper earnings. And the most important part, which he writes, G.W. Leitner was basically a very scholar and very well versed, and Leitner was basically a Jew, but then he went to Constantinople, those days, Istanbul, and Arab, and he learned the Arabic language also, and he became Muslim. Then again, like that. So the then Governor General of Britishers, he called him and he asked Leitner to set up a Lahore University because he was a great scholar. So he set up the Lahore University, and what he writes in his report, he says in the report, he writes that many schools have the education standard which is equal to Oxford and Cambridge universities of Britain. There's something really great. And person like G.W. Leitner is saying this, that's more important. This Leitner also did some survey of one of the district. The district is called Hoshiarpur district. This Hoshiarpur district, he did the survey wherein various points were there. One of the point was literacy rate. And it is documented in all these papers, all reports, everything is there. He says the literacy rate of Punjab or Hoshiarpur district precisely of the time was 84%. So 84% was the literacy rate of Hoshiarpur. But the irony is, when Britishers left India and the survey was conducted in 1948, 1947 Britishers left India, 1948, in Hoshiarpur, the literacy rate was only 9%. So that's how the Britishers have, that way, as I said, that have destroyed, as I was replying you, that how deep it was impact of this British system, that even the literacy rate was come down from 84% of a remote district, that way, 84% to 9%. That is how this impact of British system or British mechanism on the Indian education system. Yeah, that's what I was telling you. Yes.
Prashant Pulji, very good points you said. So do you think that today the new education policy in India, and I'm not asking any political thing, but on just an honest opinion, like you are an author, you write on many blogs, do you think that today's education policy of India, even though it creates a parity between the degree structures of the West and India, will it undo the damage done by the content?
Quite interesting. Very good question. Because as in the beginning you said very correctly, that Britishers have created our minds as a colonized mind. So we still have that colonizing effect. We have to decolonize ourselves first. And what what irony or what unfortunately part is, after that also, if we see that how Indians, how Britishers have colonized our mind, and it was, I mean, amazing. You know, there was a person called Alexander Walker. Alexander Walker did a lot of work in education in southmost part of India, that is called Kerala. In Kerala, there was a Malabar area. In the Malabar area, this Walker was working again in the end of 18th century that way, and he wrote very good remarks when uh, he worked in the 10 years almost he was there, and he worked in the Malabar area. He write very interesting points, and those are really interesting to read at least few points. And I would like to quote Mr. Walker. What he says? He says the literature of Malabar, that's as I said that in Kerala, has the same foundation and consists of the same materials as that of all Hindu nations. Education with them is an early and important business in every family. So education was very, was respected. Everyone know the importance of education, and that's why last time also we have seen that because of the education, India was the richest country in the world that time. Many of their women are taught to read and write, so women were aware, women were literate. That's what Mr. Walker is writing, Alexander Walker. And he says the children are instructed without violence. That's very important. The children are instructed without violence and by a process peculiarly simple. The system was brought from India to Europe. He said that that kind of education system was brought from India to Europe. And then he writes, the missionaries have now honestly owned that the system upon which these, that is British schools, are now taught are borrowed from India. I will come later that how Britishers have adopted Indian education system, and what the colonized minds like our Indians are taught that Britishers have taught us about education. Britishers have opened universities and all. I would also like to quote another missionary. He was an Austrian missionary, Austrian, John Philip Wesdin. That was his earlier name. He was when he was not a missionary. So he also worked in Kerala, in Malabar area, and almost in the early 19th century, 18th century and 19th century beginning. So 18th century end, he basically worked in Kerala, that Malabar area, and then he went to Rome. He became missionary and all, and he write his articles. For his article, he says they are accounts, like we call it blog. He says it's account. Therein he write it. They are published. They are published in 1796, just end of 18th century, 1796. Those accounts were published, and he writes the education of youth in India is much simpler and not near so expensive as in Europe. It's simple and economical, not very expensive. The method of teaching writing was introduced into India, and that's very important, introduced into India 200 years before the birth of Christ, according to the testimony of Megasthenes, and still continue to be practiced. That's very important. After he became the missionary, his name was Fra Paolino da Bartolomeo. That was his name after when he became missionary. He writes again, he says, Indians do not follow that general and superficial method of education by which children are treated as if they were all intended for the same condition and for discharging the same duties. So, as per the experts of every students, the students are basically prepared. That kind of knowledge was given. It was not a generic kind of thing. Another very important observation, which again the whatever the data we get it from Kerala, It was, everyone says that in India, the education was restricted to Brahmins only. Only Brahmin used to get the education. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. And Britishers themselves are saying, because all their data is saying that whatever the data in every province they have given, as per their survey and all, they write the Brahman, Shudra, Kshatriya, and all they did the classification of the caste system. But therein, very interesting point, in Kerala, total number of students were around 175,000 students were there that time. 175,000 students in that Kerala, that region. Out of which Brahmin students were only 42,502. This means that 24.25% Brahmin students were there, only 24.25% Brahmin students among the entire this thing. So this was totally baseless, wrong, that the education was restricted with Brahmins only. So as you rightly said that with new education policy, how we will go to counter it. But as I said that there are a lot of other things inherent to us. Like another, let me quote another person. He is John Malcolm Ludlow. He is basically a Anglo-British and kind of thing, because he was born in my state, that is called Madhya Pradesh. So he was born in Madhya Pradesh of India. He became the barrister. He then went to Britain, and in Britain he gave a lot of series of lectures. They're very famous. A lot of people used to come to attend his lectures, and then he published the set of his lectures as British India. There are 3 volumes are there in the British India, and he basically writes very interesting observations, because he was there in India, he worked in India, he worked as an officer in East India Company. So he knew Indians also very well. So in the 3 volumes of this British India, John Malcolm Ludlow says, in every Hindu village which has retained anything of its form, the rudiments of knowledge are sought to be imparted. There is not a child who is not able to read, to write, to cipher the best branch of learning. They are confessedly most proficient. So the villages, those who have restored their own tradition of ancient knowledge system, therein the students were bright, they were excel in their own proficiency, wherever they had the proficiency in their knowledge stream and all. It was there. But he right afterwards, he says, where the village system has been swept away by us, that is Britishers, in bracket he write Britishers. As in Bengal, he gave the example of Bengal, here the school system has equally disappeared. There's very clear proof that wherever the Britishers have destroyed the whatever the system was going on, then even the education system was literally destroyed. And this was really unfortunate part of it. But let me tell you very interesting point here, that we always taught that that Britishers have taught us so many things. Britishers brought this education system in India and all. But therein, what was the situation in Britain during the time of, the same time when Britishers have got the total hold or total control in India? That time, what was the situation in Britain? Data is available, figures are available, and which speaks itself. By 18th century, there are only 500 grammar schools, they used to call it. Grammar schools were there in England. In 1792, the data is available. Britishers have given the data. In the year 1792, total students in Britain were only 40,000. This was because one of the major reasons was that time the entire industrialization was coming up. There was no rule for child labor, against child labor and all. So even children were encouraged by their parents in many families to work early. So they were not able to really go for the education system, normal education system. And therefore, the literacy rate in Britain was not very good. Schools were less, students were less. At the same time, in India, situation was totally different. In India, the number of schools, number of students, if we say, were much better as compared to Britain. So, point here is that the Britishers were not having a proper education system that time. Whatever education they had, that was very expensive. So common family couldn't afford to send their children for that education system. And therefore, the children used to go after some age, they used to go in the factories, in the manufacturing unit, and education was not really given on the higher level, most of the cases. To resolve this issue, this was an issue because the education system must be for everyone. That many British also were looking for that kind of resolution, that kind of solution. So there was a person called Andrew Bale. This Andrew Bale worked in Madras Presidency in India, and he studied the education system in Madras Presidency. And he found that the education system is very good. You need not have to have number of teachers. You can have a teacher who can train, who can pick the good students among them. The good students become monitor, and the monitor used to teach the other students. He called this system as monitorial system. And he went to Britain. He went to England back. And along with Mr. Joseph Lancaster. Joseph Lancaster also worked in India, southern part of India. He also found the same thing. And both were really, their thoughts were matching. So even if before Britishers have the total control of India, in the year 1802, these two guys, that is Andrew Bale and Joseph Lancaster, they went to Britain and they started the schools based on this pattern. And this pattern, according to them, was Madras pattern. They call it monitorial pattern or monitorial system or Madras system, Madras pattern. And Britishers have schools which were running through that pattern only. So that was basically the scenario, and we still feel that it is Britishers who have, imparted or who brought all the education system, that education culture in India. But then, as I said, that before Britishers could gain a total control of India before 1818, in 1813, 1813, in the British Parliament, they passed a resolution, and that resolution is called an 1813 Charter. This 1813 Charter says that Britain is responsible to educate India. This means they were convinced that Indians are not educated. They do not know anything about even the normal etiquettes, manners, behavioral, nothing they are aware about it. They do not know anything. They are much backward in all sense. So it is our duty, it is the duty of Britain to educate them. That was the charter in 1813. Meanwhile, all these surveys, all this, everything had happened. Every survey, every report was saying that India has a very rich, well-knit, well-distributed kind of thing, self-reliant education system, which generates a lot of knowledgeable people. But ignoring all of them, again, Britain have asked Lord Macaulay to create a report what kind of education system we should have, because till the time, by 1835, this was around 1835, till that time Britishers have almost control of most part of the India, except, as I said, that Punjab was still not under the control of Britishers, but most of the India was under their control. So this is called English Education Act 1835. This act was passed, and in that act it was Lord Macaulay who was given the responsibility to create an education system, the strategy, what kind of strategy we should have. And therein, the roots are basically lying that why India should have today new education policy, the NEP. Because the colonized mind started making, because of this British thinking, Macaulay has just put kind of solid the thing that no, Indians do not know anything. Indians are not educated. They do not have their knowledge legacy. So it is Britishers, we have to educate them. And therein, most interesting part is with the Lord Macaulay. What he writes is basically, he has 36 points. Is basically that one should read all of them. That how Britishers have colonized India. Quite interesting. Therein, he says, he writes, Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay, that was his full name. He writes, all parties soon to be agreed on one point, that the dialects commonly spoken among the natives, he used to call Indians as natives of this part of India, contain neither literacy nor scientific information, and are moreover so poor and rude that until they are enriched from some other quarter, it will not be easy to translate any valuable work into them. He says, these guys, these people, these Indians are rude. They do not have any knowledge legacy. They do not have any knowledge, no literacy, nothing. He writes further in another point, I have no knowledge of either Sanskrit or Arabic. He didn't study Arabic or Sanskrit, but writes all this report. But I have done what I could to form a correct estimate of their value. I have read translations of most celebrated Arabic and Sanskrit works. I have conversed both here and at home with men distinguished by their proficiency in the Eastern tongue. I am quite ready to take the Oriental learning at the valuation of the Orientalists themselves. I have never found one among them who could deny that, this sentence is very important, who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. So entire Indian knowledge is equal to one shelf of British literature. That's what he says. The intrinsic superiority of Western literature is indeed fully admitted by those members of the committee who support the Oriental plan of education. Because the debate was going on that which should be the language on which the knowledge should be given to them. Even the British system of knowledge was given to them which language. There was an Orientalist group who was saying that no, we should use Sanskrit because Sanskrit has a lot of knowledge. But they were very small in number, very small in number. Large people saying that no, English should be the only language on which they should be taught, and all earlier knowledge system have to be washed out from their minds. That's what their idea. So he says, I mean, he writes so many things. I do not want to read everything. But what my point here is that the way he writes is horrible. He says, for example, let me just I believe no exaggeration to say that all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in the Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at preparatory schools in England. In every branch of physical or moral philosophy, the relative position of the two nations is nearly the same. So he didn't recognize at all. But now what he says, why it should be English? Because they wanted to rule this country. The country which has much large population than England, much larger than England. So a tiny nation, England, wanted to rule the entire such a large country like India. So naturally, they should have some kind of mechanism. So he writes, he talk about this mechanism, that what should be the mechanism. He says, I feel with them that it is impossible for us, that is Britishers, with our limited means, to attempt to educate the body of the people. We must at present do our best to form a class which may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, a class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in tests. That's his word. Indians, very clear, he says, who may be interpreted between us and millions of whom, a class of persons, Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects to the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. This is the clear base of this colonizing minds. In new education policy, until and unless we wash out this, it is very difficult to bring the actual Indian minds. That's basically the problem. And Britishers follow this. Even later on also, Britishers follow this.
See, one of the things, it is like, if you look at the examples of Ramayana and Mahabharata,
Yes.
Bhagwan Ram was well versed by age of 14. Now we cannot compare with Bhagwan Ram, but it is
Yes.
complete. And Arjun was well educated by the age of 14.
Yes.
Now, and that was a system of Gurukul. Gurukul system, people used to advance in studies based on their maturity in the subject matter, not just based on the number of years they have to spend at a level.
Yes.
The Western education system evolved from Christian, what you call Renaissance, because Christianity had done so much of violence from the first century. So over the years, from the colonized lands, they learned their education system, and India was the main source, like you said.
Yes.
And so the Indian degradation further happened because Macaulay and Max Muller created Indian prime ministers and Indian who were always searching for India, Bharat Khoj, always searching.
Yes. Yes.
And then it's so stupidity that the people living in the land don't know about their own land, and they have to learn from Britain. Even today, the mindset is, unless Oxford says it, Indians don't take it seriously. So the biggest qualification on a resume is Oxford University, and people do not know Oxford. The name Oxford comes from where the bulls used to cross a river, and Oxford was a place where the bulls used to pass their urine and dung, whatever they do, excrete. That was the name Oxford. That's where the Oxford word comes from. So, but the Indians have a habit. That's why there's a joke in America. We call it coconuts, brown from outside, white from inside. And we are also talking in a language which is their language, not our language. But somehow, since we're talking to American audience, so we are trying to be in English because they're listening to us. So when we are the Indian education system, when you create a new education policy, I do not see there is any connection with the ancient Indian knowledge system. See, we do not have to comply with the Western degree structure. I'll give you an example. Japanese universities, some of them they follow the Western curriculum, but majority of them they have their own standards because they want to keep Japanese in Japan so that their economy should work. So their graduation, which is much earlier, like by the age of 16, 17, a person is ready to work, is considered on par with a Western graduate. Now, that has not happened in India. So even though we have to like completely, first of all, we have to reject it. I always ask the Indian education minister or someone else to regularly produce a list of universities which is worth going for Indians to go, like kind of a guidance. Like for example, if the Harvard University speaks negative about the Hindu culture or the ancient Hindu heritage, the Indian government should ban it. Said no
Yes.
student should go there, it's against India. Or Stanford. We don't have to be scared of names because once you live in the US, you understand these are pretty normal universities. For Indians, it's a craze. For us, it's a like, if you don't go to Harvard, nobody cares about it. In fact, most of the Harvard dropouts have created bigger companies than Harvard students.
Yeah.
Harvard students become an employee generally. So the innovation is not taught in the universities. Period. Innovation is inbuilt into a person's psyche based on his past birth and many other things. So, just a short answer before we have to wrap up. So, why do you think that still we are, even though we know so much, but we do not take action on it from India? So like for example, from India, people accuse, oh, the Oxford University is writing against us, Oxford Student Union is writing. What is the importance? It's a trash in any way. It's for them. Why we still give so much importance to them? Again, we are, despite knowing the history, we are still running with the colonial mindset.
I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you. And I think the answer to this is we have to decolonize our mind. I think without that, it is very, very, very difficult. And I was just going in through the chronological order that how the our minds was colonized by Britishers. Therein, in 1844, even when the East India Company was there, the Governor General that time was Henry Hardings. Henry Hardings have put forward the order that those who got educated from the English system or English schools, they will get preference or only they will get the government jobs. If you are not through the English schools, then you will not get job. Naturally, job those days because all the wars, everything was over. So job was the one of the only thing which people need to have, and therefore they have to go to the English medium schools. And before this 1857, the first independence war in India, in the year 1854, there was Sir Charles Wood, and Sir Charles Wood have wrote some report on Indian education system again. He just wanted to just make it pakka, confirm that yes, whatever the earlier Macaulay and all have said, that is correct. So his report is called Wood's Dispatch. It's known as Wood Dispatch. It's also called as a Magna Carta of English education in India. And therein, he had very clearly mentioned, he has very clearly said, Sir Charles Wood, that Indians must be educated in English. Indian must be taught everything which England belongs to. So all the English, British systems, traditions, literature, language, everything should be taught to India. And not only teaching that, but we have to. That's what this Magna Carta of English Education in India says, that we have to wash out the legacy of ancient Indian education system from all these people. So even after the India became independent in 1947, unfortunately, that mindset continued. Unfortunately, the rulers in in India, though we have the democratic system, but still, whosoever ruled India, they had this mindset. It was a colonized mindset. And as you rightly asked the question, that how we can come out from this. So, like this efforts of this sectorology, like such kind of efforts, the decolonizing minds process will take place. And I think the only answer to become a kind of a powerful India or self-reliant India is that we should have a decolonized mind, and decolonized mind could be possible only if we know our roots of ancient history, ancient knowledge. So if we know the ancient knowledge system, then only probably this decolonizing process will start. That's what I would like to say.
I'll tell you one thing, like so the effective left in the world has vanished, and the effective right has also vanished, because uh, the right were the Christians in according in France, and they have also vanished. Now the new communism is the tech giants. They're the new communists. Twitter is blatantly, like the Jack Dorsey we know very well, is blatantly banning. He actually made President Trump lose the election. This is a fact. And because of his constant things, they're coming to India. They're communists. They are big time communists. They're Karl Marxists. Now, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, India doesn't even have an app infrastructure. They have to rely on Google or Apple, because the cell phones are controlled by those organizations.
Yes.
The moment you register your app there, that means it's an American property now. It's not Indian. You may say that you're developing it for India, but it's an American property. So not a single innovation in India is Indian now, at least in the tech space. And it's like I feel it. So am I fool or somebody else is a fool? Indians are saying they were such an innovative country, but they don't. Not a single app in India, including QApp, doesn't belong to India. The moment you register yourself on a Google platform or a Android or Apple platform, that means you are automatically an American under American law. Now, if you do not have your data centers, you may have India has many small data centers. I know the infrastructure very well, but India doesn't have the application infrastructure where people can register their apps and this. Now, again, this is a result of a colonized mindset that we are accepting. Japan has their own system. Russia has their own system. China has their own system. Including France has their own system. And Britain and America are one country. You can don't separate them because they are just one, still one. And I still call Queen as the ultimate king of America. But barring these few states, any other country which is powerful has their own system. India doesn't have a single one. And this is a point to think that when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, 1 billion Indians are getting onto cell phone and not a single app belongs to them. They're using Google Meet. We are talking on Zoom. For me, it's easy because Zoom is an American app. I can talk. But for Indians, there is nothing. There's not a single infrastructure. And India can boast of being the IT superpower, but they don't own anything. It's an IT service superpower. Like they provide manpower, like glorified labor. So where are we? What has happened? Do you think it is directly related to the colonial mindset we have? Every single engineering degree you go, you are an engineer, I'm an engineer. So when we get onto the engineering, every single topic, not a single time we have heard of Nala Setu, we have not heard of any ancient Indian engineering. And in Mahabharata time, the weapons were wind weapons, fire weapons, air weapons, water weapons, all different types of weapons. The Western world has only given the Agni weapon, fire weapons. And that too, India was a master in rockets before. Now, Chinese took the rocket science from India. They had so what I'm trying to say is that in the new education policy, do they even consider these important points? These are thought-provoking points. India doesn't even have anything.
I agree with you. In new Indian education policy, do not answer all these questions. Unfortunately, it is, I can say, just a step towards that. But if we go in this speed, it will take a lot of time, and we don't have that much time. The way others people are taking and all, so we have to, speed up our journey, and for that, the education policy need to be based on the, not based on the, but at least can recognize our ancient or old knowledge traditions. Like you rightly said, in the engineering we never taught about the Varaha Mihira. So Varaha Mihira is such a great this thing. Like so many things, I mean, why Varaha Mihira, why, I mean, Aryabhatta, this, and so many things are there. We we learn a lot of mathematicians but not Indian mathematicians. That's a problem. We still call Pythagoras theorem, we don't call Shalva Sutra. That's the unfortunate part of it. We still say that light was invented by like, I mean,
We take
everywhere
we
we
take
don't
pride
recognize those.
we take pride that I'm saying Indians we take, as an Indian origin person also, we take pride in saying publicly that we do not even ban social media. It's a security threat to you. All your citizens data in somebody else's hands. Google knows about every Indian, actually, wherever they're going. It's a security threat. And the big people in India using Gmail. Can you imagine that?
Yes.
I've seen big leaders in India using Gmail.
Hmm.
That means they are just revealing their location now.
Yes.
And so what I'm trying to say is that a country doesn't become strong if they do not respect their own talent or their own skill set. Like a country of 1.3 billion people, which is 11% of humanity, which therefore it is more important, or more actually 16% probably
Yeah.
more, out of 8 billion, 1.4 billion almost, where India is there. So China did very unpopular acts. First of all, they banned all the foreign companies. They created their own infrastructure, and their citizens, even though they are protected actually now in a way, because there is no influence from outside. See, Chanakya says your people should be not be influenced by the foreign ideologies, and that's why there is so much problem. There will be always enemies of the state within. No country has pure people, like all nationalists. No country has it, including US doesn't have it. There will be always opposition, and that is healthy also. But opposition and nationalists both, they are in a way national. All of them are nationalists, but they have to think, like, if they have to protect their own people, then they have to protect their personal data. So so uh, so this is a very important area where Indians have to start thinking where what they want to do in future, because anything you invent in India is out, because you have stored it on Google Docs. It's out. There is no security now. No intelligence will work there now, because you have willingly signed the agreement, and it's a Google possession now. So there is no alternative. Like big IT firms in India, and I'm just surprised that none of them thinks on that side. Probably it's the government's duty to start enforcing. Just relocating somebody else's server to India doesn't make sense, because still the servers are connected, and still it's the parent company. When the Google launches in India, it's for Google India Private Limited, which is still privately owned corporation of Google LLC, Alphabet LLC, Alphabet Inc. So I have no idea why people don't think that way. Just because their CEO is Indian, purposely to sell to Indians, doesn't mean the company is Indian. What mindset change we need to do here now?
Yeah. I said that I mean, as a students, we never taught our students what was our great culture, knowledge base, knowledge stream, etc. We never taught about that. My experience is that whenever you start talking about that we had such a great kind of scientist, such a great knowledge, tradition and
We're
all,
living in the
they
past. We're
are
living in the past, but what we're doing after independence, that's what everybody in America, and I'm being a devil's advocate because the questions coming in, and and this is what people ask: what have you done?
Yes. So politically, we should correct lot many things, and that is the need of an hour. We have to do that.
So thank you, Prashant Polji. It's an exciting session, and I think you laid it out very well. And for the audience asking good questions, I asked all your questions for points. Those are my points also. And thank you all for asking. And do watch it on YouTube and subscribe. This is one of the best discussions we ever had on this channel with Prashant Polji. Thank you so much for coming, taking out your valuable time, Prashantji.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.